where after you know what's before anything you try to create you try to create a secure system, but also after finding out the information from the offensive security, you create patches in order to defend the system.
Yeah, essentially we're talking offense versus defense here. At the end of the day, it's all to serve making us safer, making us improving our security posture. But we're distinguishing here between the offensive side of security and the defensive side of security. And we're going to use these colors to distinguish. Other colors that you might see related to IT are green. And this is often the developer, the developer operations people, the people that make sure things get stood up, that might not necessarily be related to security incidents. Okay, let's move forward. So what are we going to talk about in this lecture? First, we're going to wrap up and kind of close out our discussion on penetration testing. We've spent the last 5 weeks kind of drilling down on what penetration testing is, what it looks like, and actually, trying ourselves, shooting off some cyber rounds and actually attacking. We've been living on the red team side for a while. Let's talk a bit, have a final discussion on what all this is and what the whole point of red team is. We'll talk about cybersecurity jobs and what's actually out there. At the end of the day, you guys are here not just to learn cybersecurity, but to get yourselves employed in this field. And so it's important that we start now discussing what roles are actually out there and available for you. We'll talk about an overview of what Blue Team actually is. We spent a lot of time with Red Team. Let's talk about what the roles of Blue Team actually are. What is it that needs to be done on Blue Team? What are the roles there and what frameworks do they use? We'll talk about the CISA Plus. This is a CompTIA certification that aligns with a lot of our curriculum, not exactly one-to-one, but by the end of this program, you're in a pretty good position with a small amount of studying and test-taking practice. You'd be in position to take this exam. I want to say the vast majority of students that have graduated and taken the CISA have, blown through it and no problem. You've seen Chris just do it this past week, and I'm sure we can get some other feedback on people that have taken it recently and what they have to say about it and how to be best prepared for it. And then finally, we'll start talking about what are the fundamentals of blue teaming and cybersecurity. What is the role? What's the baseline here? We started with security essentials way back when, the skills that were necessary to kind of get yourselves wet into red teaming. And now we're going to talk about the fundamentals of what makes a blue team. What is the defenses that needs to get set up? And what are the frameworks that they're going to use? Cool. Any questions on this outline? Okay. Cool. It's good seeing you all again. I hope everyone had a good week. So let's move forward. Let's talk about penetration testing. You guys know plenty about this now. Tell me, what are the phases of a penetration test? What are the phases of a penetration test? Can you tell me, Clara, please, what are the phases of a penetration test?
We have passive and active recon.
Okay, go on.
And then from there, we would try to, I forgot what the word is, but we try to set up a reverse shell or get ourselves into a system and then privilege escalate if need be.
Okay, so what would you describe that process as? That process of, so you said one part, you said, go again, tell me what's the first part you said?
Recon.
Recon, okay.
Yeah.
Active and passive recon, and then after you do your active and passive recon, what do you do next?
That's when we infiltrate the system. I forgot what the term was exactly, but we just set ourselves, gain access.
We attack, right? We use the information we got to attack. All right, we've attacked, we've gained access, we have a shell, we've elevated our privileges. What do we do next?
Just take a look around, see what you could find.
Okay, I've taken a look at what I can find. What do I do next? I've gotten all the information on the machine. What did we do after you rooted a box?
Find proof that you've done so.
Right? And what did you have to do with that proof for us, the people telling you to do this penetration test? What did we ask for at the end of it?
You write a report based on like the vulnerabilities you exploited and
Exactly.
maybe recommend. Yeah.
Exactly. So we've got these 4 phases of a penetration test. There's one that we're missing, though. There's one important phase of a penetration test we're missing. Clara, you told me we have active and passive reconnaissance. We have the attacking phase. We have the reporting phase. Someone else now. What phase needs to come before all of those?
Planning.
Planning, right? What's in planning there? Tell me about that, Chris.
Well, if you're going to do a penetration test, you know, I think an easy way to think about it is imagine like you're with a consultant and you're going to do a penetration test on a company that isn't your own. You need to have plans on what's allowed to be looked at, what's not allowed to be looked at. What do you do if you're caught? You know, you have to arrange the scope and the parameter of the test before you do it.
Absolutely, absolutely. That is perhaps one of the most crucial phases, because if you don't actually do that planning, if you don't do that part, you are doing illegal things, right? If you don't have permission, you are hacking, and that is a bad thing. So yeah, we spent the last 4 weeks living in kind of that discovery / attack / little bit of reporting phase, right? You know, we kind of did the planning in terms of we got you guys access to PWK and told you about that, right? We gave you the IP ranges of machines that you can attack, right? That was the planning. We had the discovery phase where we found out what's on the network, and the attacking phases where once we find out what's on the network, let's try and exploit it. And of course, that discovery and attack, there's a back and forth. You know, you go back once you get in, you do more discovery, just like Clara was saying. And then finally, we have that reporting piece. You know, we only briefly touched on that, but that's key, right? That is what people are actually paying you to break their systems for. That report for what should I do now that things are broken, right? That is where the actual job is, not so much in the actual attacking sort of phase. So it's important that we establish this. So planning, right? Getting the permission. And in terms of getting the permission, there's 3 important pieces here. There's the timing. When are you going to be performing this attack? There's the scope. What are you going to be attacking? You know, what's within scope? If you're attacking Full Stack Academy, are you allowed to attack all of our web resources? Are you allowed to attack any of our employees' personal devices, the devices we give out to employees? You know, what's in scope for the attack? And then finally, authorization. Who is giving you permission for this attack, right? I cannot give you permission to attack Full Stack Academy. Right, there's a great Darknet Diaries episode. I think this happened last year or earlier, last year, where a security firm that does penetration testing, they were doing physical penetration testing in a courthouse in, I believe, South Dakota. And throughout their planning phase, it's extensive what they're allowed to attack and what they're not allowed to attack. And anyway, these penetration testers got caught and they got in trouble, and there was a disagreement on the authorization on who actually was allowed or who gave them permission to attack this courthouse, because it was a federal courthouse, and you know the state and the feds were arguing on who has permission to actually give you permission to break in. Great episode. But you know, these are things that are actually important. These things need to be documented. We talk about discovery. This is really the recon phase. And it's really when you're getting any extra information, right? And then finally, reporting. This is what penetration testers actually get paid for. It's telling them what you found and suggesting remediation. Oftentimes, this is really simple, and you guys have done this before. So if you cracked any of the boxes in PWK and you cracked the passwords and realized those passwords are weak, you got them on RockU, well, in your report, you should suggest that they use stronger passwords, right? Very simple. But this is the important part here, actually documenting all of this stuff and what next steps people should do. Cool. Any questions on the penetration testing, the phases of it? Awesome. We should all be super familiar with this now. And this is just but one part of cybersecurity. So let's move on to cybersecurity jobs. Right? This is what we're all essentially here for. We're looking for some role to break ourselves into this industry. So I'm just going to ask you guys, because there's so many of them. I'm just going to ask you, give me a job title that you've heard of in cybersecurity, and what do you think those people do? Just a quick one sentence. You don't have to be right. It's completely fine. And I'm just going to go down and ask you guys to tell me a security job, a cybersecurity job, and what do you think it is that they do? Liz, would you be able to start us off with a cybersecurity job and what you think they do? Any title that you've heard before?
So a SOC analyst, they look for any threats inside security systems and try and find, I guess, patches or things to fix it.
Yeah, cool. Peter, can you give us a job and a title, or a job and a role? Oh, you're muted, I think.
Sorry. IT security analyst, probably. I guess pretty much looks at logs, looks at vulnerabilities that are probably in those reports, or like I guess not reports, but scans that have been done through the environment, and pretty much analyze them and see what we can do to remedy any problems.
Yeah, absolutely. Don, can you give us one? How about one we just talked about?
Could it be risk or threat analyst?
Oh yeah, absolutely. What do you think they do?
I think they would be analyze attacks, cyber attack, response to cyber attack, analyze threat management.
Yeah. All right, let's see if we get one more. Dill, could you give us one more?
Cybersecurity engineer.
Ooh, what do you think they do?
I'm not too sure what they do, but I think they develop plans for protocols to defend and to protect the data.
Absolutely. So engineers, they must be some building aspect to it. So they must be working on some kind of products that either some kind of security products, maybe something that reads logs or makes security SOC analyst jobs easier. There's plenty of them. I always get surprised no one answers this one, which I always think is the most obvious one we were just talking about, right? Penetration testing. That's a job. We guys were just like kind of practicing that for the past 4 weeks. Right? They are actively paid to break into systems and write reports about what they did and how you could stop them. All right. We have security assessments, very similar to this, but they'll often kind of like essentially like running fire drills for cybersecurity. We have security analysts and engineers, overlap of what Liz and I think Dill were speaking about, people that are actually analyzing logs constantly and need to determine if something is a security incident or not. Same with engineers. They're building products that either make us more secure or make security engineers or analysts' job easier. Right? We have incident management. Things goes wrong. Things always are going wrong, right? What do you do after the fact? How do you manage these incidents, right? What is the experience there and what is it that you need to do? Digital forensics, right? What evidence do you need to collect and how do you make that evidence non-repudiation, right? How do you believe that you can trust that? You could say, no, we have logs that you did make this transfer and we absolutely believe them, right? How do you make digital evidence available and trustable in courts of law, right? That's all related there under digital forensics. We have threat analysis. You're working for a company. You have to help determine what are the threats to this company's digital footprint. Cybersecurity policy, perhaps working for government, right, and helping to determine what should be our cybersecurity policy. And these are just a smattering of jobs right here. These are not related to what are first or entry level jobs, but these are jobs that people have in cybersecurity. And I don't want you to think as though you need to know where you want to go right now, but you do eventually want to have an idea of what you want to do. And don't think that you get pigeonholed into one of these areas. People in cybersecurity move around constantly. You work in one area, you build some expertise, and then something else interests you, and you start, you move your way or find a position studying that and taking the skills that you learned in one area and transferring them over. I know very few people in cybersecurity that have only worked in one role or one area. People are constantly moving around, but it's important once you get that first role in there. That's where I see a lot of SOC analysts and engineers getting their way in, and eventually moving on to things like digital forensics. Okay, plenty more of cybersecurity jobs too. I encourage you to, or Jackie will, but I encourage you also to reach out to Jackie and ask her, because she has actual numbers on what our graduates, what titles our graduates have gotten. Now, it's hard to read because I know a lot of cybersecurity titles sound very different and there's a lot of overlap between them, but I think it's useful to see what types of roles you might want to be targeting once you graduate. For example, I would say digital forensics is not an entry-level role. You need to know quite a lot of depth and breadth before you can have an effective role in digital forensics. However, security analysts and engineers, that's a much more entry-level and targetable goal for you. Cool. So blue team is special, right? Red team is all about attacking and breaking in and the actual hacking. But blue team is different. Blue team is about storytelling. It is very much so about storytelling. You know, if you remember the OSI model, right, and we have those 7 layers of data, I would put blue team at layer 8 above that. We are the interface of all of this IT data and actual people and the organization that makes things happen. So to that end, blue team's going to feel very different to you than red team. There's going to be a lot more requirements that you show evidence and then you describe that evidence, perhaps in different ways and to different people. There's going to be a lot of required context switching where, you know, depending on who you're telling, there may be more or less details that are relevant to the story. You know, if you're talking to C-level people about an incident or some sort of vulnerability, it might be more important to them if they hear numbers as in, you know, how many dollars per day something might cost. Whereas if you're talking to, you know, people on your blue team, right, you may be talking about the malware, you might be talking about the checksum, you might be talking about the particular hashes of the files, but you might not bring that up to people at the C-level. So I really do want to impress upon you guys in the beginning that blue team is much more about storytelling than it is about anything else. So it's all about stories. And the big things you need to know are what questions do we need to ask about this story to tell it? And what's more important than that is when do we need to ask these questions? Is the timing actually important? Right, then how do we go about answering these questions? What do we need to look for as evidence to point us in the right directions? And really, what is the story that this evidence is telling? Because, you know, you can interpret things in different ways, and it's up to you as the analyst and what you know about the context of your organization and the entire security industry and what's going on to be able to tell a coherent story to who needs to hear it, to get them to perform whatever actions you need, right? And finally, who needs to hear this story? At what point do you need to bump up this event to people that are above your pay grade or beyond your team, right? And finally, what story do I have to tell this person? How do I make it so that they can understand why they need to do something, right? If you are talking to people that are not technical, maybe you're talking to people from your sales team, and you have to explain to them why they shouldn't be able to just, click and download some PDF from one of their customers or one of the vendors, right? You need to be able to explain to them why that's a bad idea. And part of that is storytelling and being convincing, and in some ways a little bit of manipulation to get this person to understand why this is important. Okay, so before I go on, any questions on the storytelling here? Yeah. Okay. So for Blue Team, we're going to follow this NIST cybersecurity framework. It's from the National Institute, I think, of Science and Technology. I think that's what that acronym stands for. And we're going to be using this framework to describe what we do in Blue Team and in cybersecurity. And so I'm going to require that you guys commit these terms to memory, because we're going to be using them throughout all of Blue Team, and you're going to be using them throughout your cybersecurity career. Okay, so let's talk a bit about each one of these in the framework. I do want to bring your attention to them also being a circle, and there's not really any arrows pointing in a particular direction. I kind of like to imagine it more as like a spiral, right? All of these things are constantly happening, and there's quite a bit of overlap between them, right? You don't just get put into nothing. There's no black hole, right? Like there's always something that happened before you started there. So let's start from identify. And I'm just going to read through, this is exactly from the NIST framework, and this is developing an organizational understanding to manage cybersecurity risks to systems, people, assets, data, and capabilities. So, who can, using the whatever hacker movie thing, it's like, English, please. What does this mean? Dwayne, what does this mean? What is the English, please, of this for identify?
Sorry, hold on. I'm rereading it. Let's see. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Develop. I guess using the term itself, developing some type of organized method to deal with particular situations or data. Let's see.
Think of just the word identify. Think of like, so what would be identifying in cybersecurity? What do you think?
Finding out what a particular issue or problem is, or where it came from.
Even more broad than that. So identify here in this framework, I like to think of it as simple as possible. Is I guess like in the Bible, you say, God said, let there be light, and you separate the night from the dark. This is separating what's inside and what's outside, right? Identify what is inside your system and what is outside of your system. What are the things that you actually have? What are your assets? And assets is a pretty broad term here. I think almost everything under there, the systems, the people, the data, and the capabilities, those all fall under your assets. Right? Those can be physical assets. You're a bank and you have cash on hand, right? It could be other assets. For example, your reputation, right? That can be damaged and that has value. It can be the actual data that you have. So the first part of the cybersecurity framework under identification is understanding what is inside and what is outside. What is it that you have? Right? That is what the identification portion is here for this framework. So continuing on, right? What's inside and outside? who are the actors, right? So who are the people that are inside and who are the people that are outside? So internally, you have your workers. Externally, but people that are related, you may have vendors and customers, right? How do you model these different threats? Different people will identify different threats. So, for example, Michael Cranch, right, who has developed a lot of the Red Team curriculum here. He worked or served in the United States military, and he says, he cannot go to China. That is one of in his risk assessment. He cannot go to China for reasons that he has worked in the military with doing cybersecurity things. But different people will identify different risks and different things that they need to protect. So it really has to do with your context in determining what's important to your organization or person. Is that clear? Does this make sense? Okay, cool. All right, next up is protect. And again, I'm just going to read from it, and I'm going to ask someone else to English please for me. And here we have protect is develop and implement appropriate safeguards to ensure the delivery of critical services. So what's the English please here? William, can you give me the English please here? What do you think in just a few words? What is protect? And what might fall under protect?
Just making sure that you minimize any threats of vulnerabilities that might pop up.
Absolutely, right? You minimize those things. Ways we can do it, and we'll absolutely talk more about the specifics in them, but things like having firewalls configured, having logging systems prepared, locking down particular assets, setting up the defense, right? This is all under protect. It's going to be setting up the defense. So we'll talk in specifics in the upcoming weeks, but really we're talking how do we secure the systems? Configuring those systems so that you can be able to read the logs, right? What tools and technologies are we going to be using to protect ourselves, right? Firewalls are the big things. What things can we do to lock down the networks, lock down the individual machines, lock down, if we're giving out cell phones, how do we lock them down so users maybe can't use certain applications? And of course, everything dealing with the cloud as well. Okay. Next up, we have detect. So detect, here we have develop and implement appropriate activities to identify the occurrence of a cybersecurity event. Before I ask someone to English, please, does anyone see a difference between the first two, identifying and protecting, and detecting? What is one, I guess, major difference that you might be able to say between identify and protect and detect?
The first two were before you realize infiltration has happened, the detect is after.
Huge, right? So the first two is like in preparation of. It's like, in the first two, the blue team has initiative. We're setting things up. We're making the first moves. We're identifying what is internal and what is external. Once we have identified those things, we started protecting them. Under detect, this is where the red team has finally done something, right? This is where they've moved first. Detect is where we've, maybe someone else, let me read it. Develop and implement appropriate activities to identify the occurrence of a cybersecurity event. Who have I not heard from? Teddy, what's the English, please, for detect?
Just to, I guess when you mentioned the pen testers are contributing to this, they find the vulnerability, so you can point out, you're like, that's a vulnerability.
Yes, but like, I guess, no, you're right. It's detect is, is setting those traps. How do you know that you have been attacked, right? I guess an example might be, let's say it is, it's Thanksgiving's approaching, Black Friday's approaching. People are going to be doing a lot of shopping online, perhaps, maybe more so than other years. I don't know. You are an online shopping website, or you do a lot of business online, and you have competitors that also do business online. And right before Thanksgiving, you get a ton of traffic. How do you, and it takes your system down, almost like a DDoS. How do you know if this is not just huge traffic because of the demand from Thanksgiving, or an actual cyber attack where it's one of your competitors trying to take you down so that so that people will buy from them instead of you, right? This is that detect area. How do you know you're actually being attacked, right? Setting up your scanners. And again, it's the bad guys that have the initiative in this phase. They are the people that start it, but it's up to us to set up those scanners, to be ready, kind of have traps so that we know when the bad guys actually attack. Right, so this is after the fact. After the fact, we've been breached. 100% you will be breached. Just as an idea or just as an exercise, has anyone used the website Have I Been Pwned? I think it's .com. I don't think it's .net, right? Has anyone visited that? Yeah, I know some people have, right? Almost everybody here, if you go ahead and put in one of your account informations, your username, you will find that you have been part of a breach. If you had a Yahoo account, I want to say before 2011, you have been breached. Everyone gets breached, and detecting it is, how do you know when you've been breached? What do these logs mean? How do you know normal versus anomalous behavior, right? That's what I'm talking about, or just before the Thanksgiving traffic example, right? How do you know if you've been compromised? What if you see network traffic, a huge amount of data exfiltrating your network at 3 a.m.? Right? Like that might be suspicious. That sounds like an indicator of compromise to me. Unless you already had some plan for data leaving at that time, why would it be? That sounds like bad guys doing something when everyone's sleeping. Determining, is this a security event? Or is it a privacy event? If it is one of these, this is where it's our job. If it's not one of these, maybe we pass it off to somebody else, right? If we go through the logs and we determine, the system crashed because of some overheating, the HVAC system went down, and that's why the data center went down. Well, that's not really a security incident. There's not so much we can do about that, and we pass it off to the green team to go fix it out and do whatever they have to do. Okay, cool. Any questions on detect or comments? Okay. So moving forward, we have respond. And I'll read it. So this is develop and implement appropriate activities to take action regarding a detected cybersecurity incident, excuse me. Can someone please give me the English here? Let's see, who have I not heard from? Michelle, what does this mean in English?
Well, it says basically creating a plan for what happens after you've been attacked and deciding what you should do, like in regards to the process. Like usually in big corporations, they do have a plan set up and you just follow the check boxes of what you're supposed to do once you detected intrusion and what you could do to remedy it and mitigate the risks to the corporation.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that was great. Great answer. Yeah, it's, what do we do now? We know that they're in there. What do we do? Do we leave them in? Who do we notify? Right? Right. All of this is important for the responding part. Once we've detected some sort of breach, how do we respond to it? Michelle's absolutely right. In major companies, there's going to be some sort of policy that's already been set. But let's talk about how we kind of develop this policy and what frameworks people use to develop it. Under here, it's how do we manage security incidents? This is a whole job role, really, right? Security incident management. right? How do you react to live attackers? Do you let them in here to see how far they go, right? Because once you cut their access, they know that you know. And there's a whole bunch of game theory going on right there. Sometimes when attackers are in, you want to see how deep they have gotten in, right? That's important information to know. So you might just, listen to them. You need to know who needs to be notified on your team at the C level, right? Do the authorities need to be notified, right? Is this something where the FBI or the CIA need to be notified about? How do you go about collecting the forensic information so that it's admissible in court? And then how do you build that legal case, right? Big tech companies have legal teams that you might have to interact with, and they might not know the actual technology in specifics, but you're going to, again, have to tell the story to them and how to get them to respond. Okay. And then the final part here is the recover phase, and I'll just run through this. It's developing and implementing appropriate activities to maintain plans for the resilience and to restore any capabilities or services that were impaired, right? This is standing yourself back up once things have gone down. So how do you recover from security incidents? Generally, this is going to be recovering from backups, and really just bringing yourself up back to baseline. All right. Cool. Any questions on this framework? Going to have you guys again commit this to memory. We're going to be going through it the entire through all of Blue Team, right? We're going to continue referencing this NIST cybersecurity framework. So going through it here, the circle. Okay. Cool. So that's it for NIST right now. I do have some other things I do want to share with you on it as well. But let's talk about the CISA exam. Okay, all of you guys are pretty interested in learning about it, right? This is the exam that suggests you'll be ready to be a cybersecurity analyst, and we'll talk about what that means, how to be best prepared for the exam, and what's inside it. Okay, let's get started. So it's the exam for cybersecurity analysts. Okay, that's what CompTIA says. It aligns with this NIST cybersecurity framework. It's not exactly one-to-one, but there's a tremendous amount of overlap. The CISA was developed with the NIST framework in mind. So as we're following NIST, everything we're doing is also in preparation for the CISA. It covers a broad array of jobs in cybersecurity. So it will prepare you for any of those that we were talking about before, really to get yourself as an entry level, a wide breadth. And it requires a bit more than just memorization. I'll say it's a little bit more difficult than the SEC Plus in that there's a bit of log analysis you have to do. That said, it is a multiple choice exam. So there are, of course, multiple choice techniques that you can use to effectively, I guess, game the system and score well on it. So let's think about the objectives and what exactly is inside this exam. So this CISA exam 1.0, I forget what version we're at. There's a new version that's coming in a few months. I don't have the exact date, but as far as I know, with all of these CompTIA exams, when they add a new version, not too much changes so much as the percentage of questions. I would say there's probably about 10 to 15% new questions, but everything else is just kind of mushed around in terms of what percentage of questions are in each of the sections. So the first section, or the first domain, is threat management. So this is under reconnaissance and response and the enterprise security practices. About 27% of the CISA exam covers that. The second domain is vulnerability management. So how do you manage vulnerabilities? Scanning, categorizing them, quantifying these vulnerabilities, about 26%. Incident response. So once an incident has actually happened, how do you determine the severity of it? What toolkits do you use to respond? How do you communicate this incident? And what are the steps you will take to respond to and recover and bring yourself back to baseline? That's about 23%. And finally, there's security architecture and tools, which is 24%. So here, asking specific questions on documents, identities, different architectures, and different software. These categories, I'd say it's about 25% for each one of these categories. Okay. Any questions on this exam objectives? Okay, cool. So the study guide, you should have gotten this by now, either a digital or a hard copy of it. I have a hard copy on my coffee table somewhere. We're going to be reading from this book, right? That's where a majority of the readings each evening are going to be coming from. We're going to go through pretty much the entirety of it. I think there's a few sections that we'll be skipping through, but you should read them if you plan to take the CISA after graduation. There are online resources we're going to be using as well. Flashcards, practice questions. Again, this is a multiple choice exam, and so it's not completely multiple choice, there's like 2 sections, but we're going to get you a significant amount of practice and at-bats practicing with these questions so that you're best prepared so that you can take this certification after graduation. Now, we're not shortly after graduation. So we'll focus, there will be time allotted in class for practicing these skills specifically for this exam. So we'll actually have about 45 minutes practicing individually a little later today, shortly actually. Yeah, pretty much right now. So we're going to take a bit of a, well, not a break. Let me actually Control Shift, trying a new way of doing this. There we go. So let me stop share and stop recording.